haven't told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jupes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jupes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
we're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, hello there. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Jupes and Co, keeping you company on Valentine's night, right through until 7 o'clock this evening. Lots to get into. The COVID-19 inquiry begins its first hearings, but get this. There are already requests for a delay. Do you trust that we're ever properly going to have a thorough, robust, transparent COVID investigation? Do you think you'll get the answers that some of you are looking for? Are you perhaps shouting at your screen saying, forget it all, move on? Why do we need to spend so much time, money and effort looking backwards? Let's focus forwards. Where do you stand on it all? And when it comes to schools, how tough should they be? How many rules, regulations, restrictions do you think that kids need in order to behave? There's one school in Staffordshire that, get this, they've put bars, physical bars, on their toilets during class time. Personally, I think it's a great idea, but there are many that are up in arms, saying that it is absolutely inappropriate. Is it? Where do you draw the line? How much discipline, robustness do you think our schools need? And do you struggle with your weight? What lengths would you go to lose the pounds? Weight loss jabs, could soon be available on the high street. Would you have them? Would you get them? What about these whole kind of shady corners of the internet? Would you buy weight loss stuff from there? Would you trust what you are getting and injecting in yourself? And last but not least, what class are you? Do you know? Do you care? Most of us, many of us, say that there's a huge class discrepancy. But how do we define class? In particular, working class. Is it still a thing? Are you in it? How do you know? And do you ever leave it? We'll have all of that to come. But first, let's get ourselves up to speed, shall we, with tonight's latest headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. Let's bring you some breaking news from the last half hour here on GB News tonight. The government says one British person has died whilst in Ukraine. The Foreign Office has said the family has been informed and they are in touch with local authorities in the region. That's all the detail we have for you at the moment. One British person dying in Ukraine. Well, that comes as the Prime Minister announced a national 1-minute silence to be held in the UK to mark the first anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February. Meanwhile, NATO defence ministers are discussing support for the country in Brussels, including possible supply of fighter jets to Kyiv. That comes after the alliance warned yesterday it's seen a fresh Russian offensive in Ukraine, with the Kremlin claiming that NATO is prolonging the conflict. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says the alliance will do all it can to help the war-torn country.
We need to ensure that Ukraine gets the weapons it needs to be able to retake territory, liberate the lands and win this war and prevail as a sovereign independent nation.
Here, 2 serving police officers will face misconduct cases over the way they handled reports of indecent exposure by Sarah Everard's killer. Former Met police officer Wayne Cousins is behind bars serving a whole life order for murdering Sarah Everard and has admitted 3 counts of indecent exposure, one of which he committed just 4 days before her death. The Independent Office for Police Conduct says the new cases involve a Met police constable and a Kent police sergeant. The Northern Ireland Assembly has failed to elect a new Speaker today, stopping new organ donation legislation from being passed. The DUP vetoed the election again during a recall sitting this afternoon. That's the 6th failed attempt since the election in May in an ongoing protest over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Meanwhile, negotiations between the UK and the EU to resolve differences over post-Brexit agreements are continuing. University staff are staging the first of 3 days of walkouts this week, threatening disruption at 150 universities. Around 70,000 members of the University of College Union are on the picket lines in an ongoing dispute over pay, pensions and working conditions. Civil servants are also striking this week, including staff from the Department for Work and Pensions and the DVLA. In the United States, the White House says no group or individual has come forward to claim responsibility for the 3 recent unidentified objects shot down over their airspace. It said there's no indication they were part of China's spy program. Meanwhile, the US military says it has recovered significant debris from the site of the first suspected Chinese spy balloon brought down off the coast of Carolina 10 days ago. Beijing has denied the object was part of their government spy system. In Cheshire, detectives looking into the murder of Brianna Gay say they're investigating whether it was a hate crime. The 16-year-old, who was a transgender girl, was fatally stabbed in a park near Warrington last Saturday. A boy and a girl, both aged 15, have been arrested on suspicion of murder. Police have been given an extra 30 hours to question both of them. And a 22-year-old man is in a critical condition in hospital after a machete attack at a pub in East London. The authorities were called to the Duke in Walthamstow, where 3 men were found with stab wounds inside the pub and a 4th was found nearby. 3 of the men, aged between 27 and 42, are in a stable condition. Police believe the attack was targeted, but no arrests have been made. And more than 41,000 people are now known to have died following earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria. UK charities and organisations are sending emergency supplies worth more than £350,000, 8 days after the disaster. And Syria's president has told the United Nations today he's happy to open 2 more border crossings for an initial 3-month period so emergency aid can enter from neighbouring Turkey. And lastly, the King has been meeting volunteers from the UK's Turkish community today. They've been sending aid to their home country after last week's earthquakes. King Charles visited a West London charity to see the efforts of residents working to help those left homeless in Turkey and Syria. The King told the local communities how deeply sorry he was. And during his visit, the King was also given some Turkish tea to taste, as well as making a brief stop at a nearby kebab takeaway. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Back now to Jupes and Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I am Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, I've got the political consultant Emma Burnell and Toby Young, who's the director of the Free Speech Union. Good evening, you lucky people, spending your Valentine's night with me and our wonderful audience, of course. And speaking of you guys, you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us three here, it's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at GBNews. Don't forget, I want to talk to you about class. What class are you? Does it even still exist, by the way? 80% of adults thereabouts thinks there's a massive divide between the social classes in this country. But how do you kind of calculate it all? Who sits where? Give me your thoughts. Also, the COVID inquiry. Do you trust it? Do you think it's ever properly going to happen and give you the answers that you want? Discipline in schools as well. How much is too much? How little is not enough, I think, really. As much discipline, the better, if you ask me. But maybe I am wrong. Get your thoughts in. You can tweet me as well at GB News. But tonight is Valentine's night. I've got my special Valentine's dress on, Toby. I'm very disappointed to see that you have not failed. Yes, you've not come dressed in red. Very disappointing. I'm also very disappointed to hear that Patrick Christie's received an anonymous Valentine's Day card, and I received 0 from any of you guys. What on earth is going on? And lastly, I'm also disappointed for another reason, because if you are a regular viewer to Jupes and Co, you've been watching for some time, you might remember this exact day, this time last year, I reached out to you guys, didn't I? Do you recall this? Let's take a look. Day, one of my production team piped up today to tell me that he was single. Producer Richard, he's going to be spending his Valentine's night alone, so he is. And he told me he was on Tinder, but he reckons that his Tinder's broken because he don't get any matches. So here he is, our Richard. Look at him.
Michelle, you can't.
There he is. Why can't I do this? Yes, I can. There you go, Richard, 24.
Oh, Richard,
if you are a lady in the London area and you see that fine specimen of mankind on your Tinder, give him a swipe. Well, the reason I'm disappointed is because that fine specimen of mankind, producer Richard, ladies and gents, is still single 1 year on. What is going on? When I heard that news, I thought to myself, I have to try and help him out. So look at him, this dashing chap on your screens there. If you are listening, not watching, you're missing out. Let me tell you that. That is producer Richard. I personally vouch for him. He's a very nice man. You will not meet finer than him. So if you're sitting there thinking, shut up about Valentine's Day, Michelle, because I'm single, you don't need to be single. Look at him, he's available. Get in touch. If I can try and find him a match, it'll make me a very happy woman tonight. Producer Richard, romance for Richard, if you're interested. Hey, yeah, you're single, Emma.
I'm also twice his age.
Oh, OK. Well, I'll move on. If you're not twice his age and Richard is your kind of chap, get in touch with me. That's fair enough, isn't it, Richard? I'm calling you Richard. We're all Richards tonight.
Fear not, he's younger and better looking than me.
There are many Richards out there, though, all of them seeking love. Are you doing anything special for Valentine's night?
I'm going to see QPR v Sunderland at Loftus Road. Can't say my wife was that bothered about it, to be honest. We've been married for 21 years.
That is the height of romance. Well done, Toby. Emma, any plans?
Yep, I'm going to the cinema with my best friend and, let's face it, essentially my life partner, person I spend most time with, and we're off to see a movie tonight.
What movie?
Tar.
What?
Tar, yeah, I can never remember her name.
T-A-R?
T-A-R, about a composer and a very driven woman.
Oh, I thought it was about road finishings. But anyway, sounds riveting. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? If you're doing anything interesting, make sure you've got GB News on in the background. That is, what's more romantic than us lot in your ear? We're on the radio, by the way. If you want to go out, you can take us with you. Don't forget that. Whatever you're doing, have a wonderful evening. But stay tuned for now, because, firstly, I want to get into the COVID-19 inquiry. It began its first hearings today. The first order of business. A delay. Yes, it was. This was apparently because to give them time to redact the names of junior officials and some other information that perhaps could be deemed irrelevant. Toby, I found out earlier on, I mean, I make out like I did some journalistic digging. Basically, you just told me that you yourself have been in touch about this COVID inquiry. Do you trust that we're going to get a thorough, meaningful, transparent inquiry for all this COVID stuff?
Well, there was a public consultation about what the terms of reference of the inquiry should be, and I submitted something to that consultation, and I said, I hope the public inquiry looks into the suppression of dissent during the pandemic, particularly the early part of the pandemic. People who criticised the government's pandemic response, particularly those who criticised the public health advice, social distancing, masking, school closures and so forth, found it very difficult to get a public platform, not on GB News, I should say, but on channels like the BBC, ITV, Sky News, and newspapers like The Times and The Guardian. That's why I set up, at the time, Lockdown Skeptics, now The Daily Skeptic, to give people a platform from which to criticise the government's pandemic response, or at least challenge it and question whether there might be a better response. My worry about the inquiry, I mean, is there's so much to get through. It's disappointing that it's been delayed. I mean, there's so much I think the government got wrong. I mean, I'm not sure they should have locked down the first time, let alone the second time and the third time. I'm worried that the inquiry will just look at whether we locked down hard enough and fast enough and not look at whether actually the lockdown was the best response in the first place. They need to look at why patients were discharged from hospitals back into care homes without being tested to see if they were infectious with COVID-19. They need to look at why £37 billion was spent on NHS test and trace when seemingly it had almost no impact. We certainly didn't stop us locking down again. They need to look at school closures. They need to look at stopping people attending funerals and weddings. They need to look at people stopping visiting their loved ones in care homes. There's so much, I think, the government got wrong in the past 2.5, 3 years. I mean, this inquiry, I imagine, is going to go on for a very long time. The sooner it starts, the better.
Are you affected by this at home? Perhaps, I don't know, maybe you did lose someone through COVID. Do you sit here, you know, filled with trust, thinking, yes, I do trust the people looking into it to give me those answers? Are you perhaps on the other side of the fence? You had your life severely impacted by the things such as lockdown, and perhaps you've got the concern, as Toby was just mentioning, that, you know, step one, point one of this inquiry is just assuming that lockdowns, etc., was the right way to go. Where do you stand on it all, Emma?
In terms of lockdowns, I hated them, but I supported them, and that's a difficult position to be in. They impacted me very difficult in terms of my mental health, but I could see the rationale behind doing it as necessary. I think it would be only right and fair if the inquiry does look into that necessity as much as it looks into whether it happened too slowly. I think if people like me think it did happen too slowly and people like you question whether it should happen at all, both questions should be asked. Proper evidence should be taken. There's a problem I have with the will it give you the answers you want response, because I think many people have got instinctual answers they want to hear that they won't necessarily come to in this inquiry. And the problem with an inquiry is it won't necessarily give you the answers you want, it will give the answers they find. Now, we do need to ask the right questions to make sure that those answers are robust, but I don't think expecting the answers you want is the right attitude to go into any inquiry. I agree that there was an awful lot that went wrong beyond lockdown. Test and trace, absolute disaster, complete waste of public money, appallingly badly spent. Other things that were appallingly badly spent public money. And I think what I really want to see come out of this are two things. First of all, why were we so underprepared? But far, far more importantly, what can we do to ensure, because the next thing won't be exactly the same, but how do we strengthen our emergency response to the kinds of emergencies that we might see coming down the track so that we can make sure that we have much more readiness for them? And how can we balance the need to enforce certain, really national things, laws that get put down, with massive over-enforcement of, for example, going after women having a cup of coffee in the Yorkshire Dales or the Derbyshire Dales or something? There has to be a better... And I feel that one of the questions that I would like answered is how we policed lockdown and how that seemed to be almost lawless in and of itself.
Yeah, so in terms of if you're wondering, well, what is this inquiry even going to look at? You've heard a few things about what it should look at. Preparedness and resilience apparently is in there, how the decisions were made, by whom, and how were they all kind of implemented, the shielding and the protection of the clinically vulnerable, like you mentioned in there, the testing and contact tracing, the impact on health and healthcare and sector workers, other key workers, closure and reopening examples when it comes to schools and things like that. The list is pages long. What if there's people out there, Toby, that are of the mindset, look, why are you lot banging on about COVID again? It's happened now. You know, if we get a pandemic again, it's probably going to be a different type or whatever. Why are you spending, you know, I dread to think how much this will cost, how many years this will take, how many man-hours it will use up. If people are out there saying, just move on, forget it, move on, look forward, not back, what would you say to them?
Well, I think it's a good question. I mean, the standard response is, well, we need to learn lessons so we can be better prepared next time. But the problem with that answer is that we did have public inquiries into the government's response to previous pandemics, avian flu, foot and mouth, and those public inquiries and their conclusions fed into the pandemic preparedness strategy, which should have informed our response to this particular pandemic. But the government threw that strategy out of the window. It was panicked when it saw television footage, pictures in Milan of people dying in hospital corridors. They saw other countries around the world locking down. The WHO urged countries to lock down. You need to copy China. And they panicked, threw the pandemic preparedness strategy in the bin and just immediately locked down. So what's the point of this inquiry if our response to the next pandemic isn't informed by the lessons we've learnt from this pandemic, just as our response to this one wasn't informed by the lessons learnt from previous pandemics?
Yeah, and I think Toby's spot on, Emma, because this phrase, lessons learned, you hear it right across the public sector in so many different guises. And actually, you think to yourself, but what lessons have you learned? Because actually things repeat themselves, problems seem to get worse often, not better. So quite frankly, the public sector has a very, very poor track record of learning any lessons. Hannah's just been in contact and said, Michelle, I don't even believe the inquiry will be honest because the government has too much to lose.
Well, the inquiry isn't being done by the government, it's being done by Parliament and some of that are people who are in opposition to the government. So I think that in terms of what the government has to lose, I mean, I'm happy to bash this government all day long, but I think in these terms that's not the way that this particular inquiry will play out. But there is a sense, I think, a real sense that public inquiries kick things into the long grass and then are not acted on when they get there. So I'm thinking of Grenfell, for example. So little of the recommendations of the Grenfell inquiry have actually been enacted. And we're still seeing leaseholders in high-rise blocks in terrible positions, people living in appalling housing status because they're not having their housing seen to in ways that were completely recommended out of that inquiry. So I think I absolutely agree that there is a real problem culturally and politically with the fact that we don't learn lessons, that we do just try to move on. That doesn't mean I think that's the right thing to do. I'd rather that we learn to learn lessons rather than just shrug things off.
Well, you guys have been in touch. Interestingly, there's a lot of people that have this kind of view. So Betty says, what is the point now? This is just more waste of money. Dennis says, stop going backwards. Let's just get on with it. There are many more problems now. David says, I do not care. This is a waste of time and money. Rebecca, there, says, I will never forgive the government for the lockdowns and what they did to children. My 12-year-old daughter developed anxiety at the beginning, and she is still battling it now. See, that's awful. That's just giving me goosepimples, that, because I do feel so strongly about the impact on those young people. Lee says, the lockdowns over COVID destroyed this country, and in his view, he says it will take 50 years to recover anything from it. The UK is finished for a generation. Harsh thoughts there. Do you agree with any of them? Tell me your own. gbviews@gbnews.uk is how you can reach me tonight. Going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some more of your reflection, but I also want to talk to you about how tough schools should be. There's a school in Staffordshire. Almost makes me laugh. I think it's so ridiculous. But anyway, some people are calling it a prison because it's put bars over the toilet doors, basically to stop kids mucking around and going in there during class time. Some people are saying it's outrageous. Personally, I think it's quite sensible. And I think a lot of schools should be a bit more tough. Don't you? Give me your thoughts. I'll see you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Jupes and Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. On this Valentine's night, alongside me, I've got the political consultant, Emma Burnell, and Toby Young, the director of the Free Speech Union. My two dates for tonight, you lucky people. Alan, you just really made me laugh, so you just did, in response to the next conversation that I want to have with you about schools. Students at a school in Stoke-on-Trent have apparently walked out in protest after the toilets were barred, and when I say barred, everyone, I literally mean bars across them, during lesson times. One parent has compared it to a prison and said pupils are being treated like animals. I mean, give me a break. Emma, where do you stand?
I think if you need to wee, you can't really think of much else as your bladder fills and expands and you get more and more uncomfortable. You are not in the best state for learning. If, on the other hand, you are that kid who takes the urine and has 10 minutes out of each class every day, then there should be a way of stopping that. There's got to be a more sensible way of managing this than bars on the loos, you would think. You don't want kids getting urinary tract infections because they're trying to hold it in. A whole group of girls with cystitis is not a group of girls that's going to learn anything.
I know, but come on, if you know that you're about to go into a lesson, so you have to sit in your lesson for, I don't know, an hour or whatever your lesson is, who cares? You know, if you're a sensible individual intent on learning as opposed to just messing around, you're probably not going to drink a 2-litre bottle of Coca-Cola as you walk into that classroom, and if you do, you're a bit of an idiot, really.
But even if you're not going, you should be drinking water and keeping reasonably hydrated throughout the day. That's just good health advice. But also, that 15-minute break, anyone who's been to the kind of school I went to knows that the girls lose to that 15 minutes break is it would make the South Bronx look like a decent, civilised, respectable place to be. It's and if you are being bullied or are nervous or shy, it is simply the most horrific and terrifying place in the world. So actually waiting 5 minutes and going quietly during class and then coming back can be really important for some kids. And that's probably true of boys as well. I don't know what it's like in the boys' loos. I've never been in the boys' loos, thank God. But I can't... girls hang out in the loos. That's sort of a classic trope, isn't it? And they can be really quite a vicious place to be. So I think it's really just be sensible. Find balance and be sensible on this.
Toby, I've got to say, right, when I hear, oh, yeah, these kids, they've walked out in protest, The parents are outraged. They're calling it a prison. I think, oh, get over yourselves. Like, surely you want your kids to pack it in and behave and sit in your classroom and focus. You know a lot more about education and schools than probably us two put together. You used to run a free school, didn't you? What do you make to it all?
Well, I ran a multi-academy trust which had 4 free schools sitting within it and
I stand correct.
co-found those schools. Yeah, I mean, we had a pretty firm behaviour management system in place. I wouldn't describe it as zero tolerance of bad behaviour, but pretty close to it, and that included disrupting lessons, and for the most part, lessons are held in silence unless the teacher asks one of the children to participate. I'm in favour of this policy. I think it's sensible. Of course, there will be costs, but I think the benefits will outweigh those costs. Any teacher can tell you that if the school policy is to allow the children to go to the toilet when they put their hands up, whenever they put their hands up, children will take advantage of that policy. Of course they will. That's just their nature. And you'll constantly be interrupted in the course of teaching a lesson by children putting their hands up, wanting to go toilet, miss, or go toilet, sir. So I think it's a sensible policy. And as you say, it's not very difficult for children to be able to manage so they don't drink too much beforehand, or they make sure they go to the toilet before the lesson or during break. I don't think there'll be so many emergencies that the costs will be that high.
Alan's comment made me laugh just as I came back from my break, because Alan was saying that if he was in one of these classes and he needed to go to the toilet, he would just basically pull his pants down and do his business there in the classroom. And it made me chuckle, but obviously I don't condone that kind of behaviour. These people, by the way, Emma, these kids that you say, oh, yeah, you know, you might get a UTI or cystitis, I bet my bottom dollar they could control their urges to go to the toilet if they were sat in a cinema watching a movie.
Not these days. Have you seen how long films are? I'm terrified of this one I'm seeing tonight.
I'll pick you up at one point, Emma. You said that it's very difficult to focus, to concentrate if you want to pee. It's all you can think about. Actually, I remember when I first went on Question Time, someone passed on a nugget of advice they'd been given, curiously enough, by Enoch Powell. He said that whenever he goes on to Question Time, he makes sure he doesn't pee beforehand, because wanting to pee when you're on telly makes you a bit sharper, a bit quicker.
Gives you an edge.
You're less likely to kind of get
really, all I think about is how my eyes are starting to feel like a cartoon.
Mike says, Michelle, are we really sitting here discussing people going to toilet? Is there nothing else better to discuss? Yes, we are talking about it, and I'll tell you for why, Mike, because I personally worry that we are breeding a generation, of absolute wet lettuces of kids who are so
if they haven't been to the loo.
Entitled. No, but they're so self-entitled, going out on these protests because they can't pick and choose how much time they can mess around during classrooms in the toilet, parents getting involved, calling them prisons. I think it's pathetic, actually. So I think the conversation about how tough should schools be is a very important one for anyone who's got kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, which is pretty much all of us, quite frankly. Another thing I would do as well is ban phones from the classrooms. I would take those telephones off the kids, which, by the way, I don't think half these kids should have smartphones in the first place, but that's a different topic. And I'd take those phones off them, and they won't get them back until the end of the school day. That's fair enough, isn't it, Toby?
Absolutely.
You'd have my support on that one. Most of the time, it is about being sensible, and a phone in the classroom's not sensible.
But why do all these parents give all these really young kids smartphones?
I mean, I always go back to my niece and nephew. I think we talked about my nephew last time we were on together. I think they've had them from mid-teens, but very much with a strict, you don't use it in school policy, and their school enforces that, and they are pretty rigid. As I understand it, because all their friends are in the same classes or the same school years, there's not a load of WhatsApps that are flying around because they're all not using them.
This came up at our multi-academy trust, so a lot of the staff wanted to just ban phones outright, and the pushback from parents was, if my child is walking to and from school, I want to be able to call them. I want them to be able to call me if they get into any kind of difficulty. So we thought, OK, fine. They can bring them to school, but if they're seen using them during the school day, they get confiscated for a week. And that policy seems to have worked.
I go to quite a lot of immersive theatre, and they're very, very strict about phones there because you can't photograph anything. And you have to put it into this sort of pouch thing that's locked.
Yes.
And that sort of thing is a perfectly acceptable way of just you go in the classroom, you put your phone in a pouch. It seems fairly sensible to me.
I can safely say that not many of you guys at home are having any of this. Eileen says, no, I do not think toilets should be locked. Some kids might have irritable bowel or might be sick. Yes, but if you've got a medical issue, you are actually allowed to use the toilet.
But you can't get in.
No, well, you ask your teacher, don't you? At the start of your lesson, you have a word, or your teacher would know you've got an ailment or whatever, and you would just be sensible about it. What they're trying to do is stop people being idiotic and spending their time disrupting the lessons by being an up and down like a yo-yo. Karen says, I think this is barbaric. If you had a bladder issue, would you want to go hunting for a key to the toilet? Please, can you stop being so insensitive? Barbaric, Karen. Saying that you can only use the toilet in the break. I mean, come on now. If you were saying that children could never go to the toilet ever and literally had to wet their own pants, then I might be with you there. But restricting it to breaks, of which the timing is clear to everyone involved, I don't really think that's barbaric, but we can agree to disagree. Tony says, I work in a school and our toilets get trashed constantly. So, yes, it's a great idea putting bars on them during lesson times. David, you're a smart man, you say discipline is the problem. We should not allow mobile phones in any classrooms. Hear to that. Right, I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll have some more of your insights. But let me ask you this. Have you got a problem with your weight? Is it something that you struggle with? Well, would you have a weekly jab, an injection to help you lose weight? Apparently. We could be seeing more of these things available on the high street anytime soon. Would you perhaps leg beyond the high street, go online and get this kind of stuff, all in the quest of losing a few pounds? Have we gone a bit too far when it comes to people? Everyone wants to be slim and all the rest of it. Give me your thoughts and I'll see you in 2.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jupes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jupes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock this evening alongside me, the political consultant Emma Burnell and Toby Young, the director of the Free Speech Union. We've just been talking about how much discipline in schools is too much discipline, in particular doing things like putting bars up at the toilets to stop you going to toilet in the middle of the class. Anne has just been in touch with me on Twitter saying I was a school governor and we had a head of the secondary school and he did confiscate telephones. You say there are children who are type 1 diabetics. A child could have IBS or some other bowel problems or a kidney problem. And you end by telling me that I sound like a far-right zealot. See, I've got to be honest, Anne, this is one of the problems, I think, in today's society. Everything these days gets described as far-right. If everything is far-right, even suggesting that people shouldn't mess around in a classroom, then, quite frankly, where do we go from there? Right, do you have a problem with your weight? High Street Chemists are set to sell a controversial weight loss jab, popular amongst celebrities apparently, including Elon Musk. Experts are saying this is not a quick fix and it should only be offered under medical supervision. Toby Young, I'll start with you on this one. Would you kind of ever think to yourself, right, you know, yeah, I need to lose a few pounds or whatever, so I know what I'm going to do today, start injecting myself with stuff?
Yeah, I actually
Really?
thought about this. A friend of mine who I saw
I came to you
over
because I
Christmas.
thought you was going to say no. That's why I came to you.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, a friend of mine who I saw over Christmas had lost a lot of weight.
Right.
And I said, how come you've lost all this weight? It's amazing. And he said he'd been taking this drug called Ozempic, which is the drug we're talking about, one of the drugs we're talking about. What it does is it suppresses your appetite. So he no longer wants to eat cake or biscuits. He doesn't have to have seconds. And he found it really easy to lose weight because his appetite had basically gone. And also, he said another helpful thing about it was that on this particular drug, Ozempic, I think there are other drugs, but on this particular one, he could only drink 20 units of alcohol per week. That's about 2 bottles of wine. And so it was a way of also controlling his drinking. And I thought, well, that sounds potentially quite good. I feel like I could lose maybe half a stone. So I did think about it, but he then said, don't do it without going to see your GP, getting yourself properly checked out, see if it actually is appropriate to use this drug in your case. And one worry about making it available in Boots and Superdrug on the high street is that people for whom it isn't suitable, for whom it does pose a medical risk, people who aren't going to curb their drinking, for instance, while taking the drug, could get into difficulty.
You say it sounds quite good. I think it sounds quite lazy. That people, you just said, oh, yeah, I looked at my mate, he looked good. I could just inject myself with this stuff and off falls the pounds. Surely the best way to lose weight and the healthiest way to lose weight is eat less and move more. Trying to inject yourself with this and that and the other, it's almost like what I would call like the Instagram of life, looking at someone with Instagram and going, how do I fast track to that?
Well, I think you're making a common mistake, if you don't mind me saying so, Michelle, that you often make on this programme, which is you are a remarkable, driven, self-made woman, and you often think that other people should have your willpower, your stamina, your drive. But, you know, I'm not sure. I have tried to lose weight, and sometimes I've succeeded, but then I put it back on, and, you know, I'm not particularly overweight.
I'm looking at you, and I have to say, I've got a full body shot. You guys are missing out on that wonderful vision, which is Toby's entire body. But I can see your entire body, and I am
Make it sound like he's naked under the table.
No, he's not naked. He's got pants on and everything. But I would be absolutely astonished that you would even remotely consider that you need to lose weight.
It's my BMI.
Well, you might be breathing in.
I think my BMI is 25.3, and being 25 or under is when you're a healthy weight. So I'm just fractionally overweight. So I think it would be healthy for me to lose weight, and that's why I was thinking about it. But I decided not to. And I agree. If you do have the willpower to eat less and exercise more, that's clearly a preferable way of doing it.
See, I think willpower is a choice. Toby thinks that I'm being a bit harsh and judging everyone by a wrong set of standards. What do you make to it, Emma?
Well, I think it's difficult. I probably wouldn't choose to use this drug myself personally, although, as you know, I have had surgery, which gave me the head start I needed to then allow my willpower to really kick in and take over. I've lost 12.5 stone.
Which is incredible.
And the weight loss surgery I had was a head start. It was like... it just gave me the incentive to turn things around, but I couldn't have done it just with that alone. And I know because I have a friend who had the same surgery for whom, sadly, the result has not been the same. So what worries me about this drug, reading about it, it only works as long as you're taking the drug, and you're only supposed to take the drug for 2 years. For some people, that 2 years will be the 2 years they absolutely turn things around. They integrate walking or some sort of exercise into their life much more. They get used to taking small portions. Great. For others, they will pile the weight straight back on because they won't have done that other additional work that you need, that mental work and that habitual work. And so taking this out of the process that you would go through with a doctor, I think is what worries me, because I think it won't give people the long-term result that they might be looking for, rather than that short, quick fix.
Congratulations, by the way. This is coming in as well. 12 stone. To lose 12 stone is absolutely
I've got
phenomenal.
2 stone, £4 to go before I hit my target. But I've lost £9 in February, so I'm feeling very happy with myself at the moment.
But then what? So you're going to hit your target and then what?
I stay at target.
Dusted?
Once you... so I'm doing Slimming World, which I love. At Slimming World, you pay every week to go in and get weighed, and you can stay to the group and you discuss great recipes and things. Once you hit target, you never pay again until you go out of target. So it's like you keep having that support network, that support system, that wonderful group of friends, that wonderful input of recipes and things. But the incentive is that you're not paying your £5 a week. And it's like positive reinforcement in so many ways. And there's so much of what I get from being thinner than I was is positive reinforcement. I'm not going to lie, I like looking better than I used to. But more importantly, I love feeling better than I used to.
Yeah. I think one argument against this particular drug is that it's quite expensive. I worked out, buying it on the dark web, admittedly, and not going through my doctor and getting it on prescription, it was going to cost me about £200 a month. And if you're keeping weight off and you know you're going to gain it if you stop taking the drug, that means it's very difficult to stop paying that amount. It's a bit like the reason I never took Rogaine. So Rogaine is this hair loss drug. All it does is prevent you getting any balder. It doesn't actually, I don't think, restore your hair. So you kind of put it on and you kind of freeze the point at which you're going bald. You don't get any balder, but then you have to keep on paying to use it, because the moment you stop using it, all the hair you would have lost suddenly falls out overnight, and that's pretty traumatic. So I just thought I'll just live with it.
I just worry about... I think I would worry about the... the side effects of you're saying about, getting this stuff off the dark web. Michelle has been in contact saying, Michelle, two Michelles, you're saying just lose a few pounds, and you're saying it glibly, but Michelle's explaining she has a spinal problem from an accident which has resulted in almost 30 years of pain, which has really led to, her struggling with her weight. You point out to me, Michelle, and I think it's a very good point, that this is not just about people wanting to lose weight for vanity, but sometimes, literally, people need to lose weight because of health problems. Otherwise, heaven help their future health prospects going forward.
I completely feel for Michelle. When I was as heavy as I was in constant pain. And if I walked even a short distance, I remember walking across Trafalgar Square, and by halfway across, my back was seizing up. It was a crippling pain. I wouldn't walk anywhere with anyone. I'd always arranged to meet people. I knew which tube stations had steps and which didn't. That's how much of your life it takes up.
Wow, interesting. Right, I shall leave you to ponder some of that. And when I come back, I want to ask you a very simple question. What class are you? Do you know? Does it matter? Apparently, 80% of us think that there's a massive disparity now between class in this country. But which class are you? Me, I would definitely, categorically say working class, always will be. Where are you? Give me your thoughts. I'll see you at 2.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us. on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Jupes and Co with me, Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Lots of you guys getting in touch about that conversation we've just been having about weight loss injections, soon readily available to help people. Angela says, Michelle, you're completely wrong with your comments about it being easy to lose weight. It is not. Do not judge people by your own standards. Jackie goes a step further. She says, shame on you, Michelle. People do not choose to be fat. There is usually another reason. Obesity is the outcome, not the cause, and there is usually a traumatic reason for obesity. Well, I mean, that is a whole different debate because respectfully, I would respectfully disagree with you in lots of those cases, Jackie, but each to their own. All views are welcome. Right. What class are you? Let's talk working class because 80% of adults there or thereabouts think that there is this big class divide in this country, which then makes me think, well, how do you even define class? For me personally, I really strongly believe I am working class, always will be. But what is it, Toby? What is it that defines who we are, which class we sit on?
Well, there is no, there are no fixed rules in this discussion. I mean, one of the interesting things about class is how you perceive it and how you rank others depends upon what class you are yourself. I would take issue with your description of yourself as working class.
He's pointing at me, everyone. If you're listening, not watching, the point is out. You're not aggressive. Don't bother me. You can point all you like. Go on.
Because,
what are you going to take issue with me about?
Well, it seems to me that you're defining class entirely according to parental socioeconomic status and level of education.
No,
and you tick those boxes because you were born on a council estate and you left school at 16. But it's also about your occupation. It's also about your income. And in terms of occupation and income, I'd put you upper middle class. So if you were defined, if you were defined entirely by where you were born and what level of education you had, that would mean that was fixed in stone at the age of 16. If you leave school at the age of 16 or 18 now. Don't go to university, but it's not fixed in stone. We have such a thing as social mobility. Admittedly, it's declining, but it still exists. So, you have to take other factors into account. You've done very well for yourself, so you may have been born working class, but I think it's misleading to describe yourself as still working class now.
I entirely disagree with you, and I'm going to tell you how I define class in a minute, but as fascinating as I think my opinions are, I also want to hear from you, Emma. So tell me, where do you stand on this? And I'll respond to you in a sec, Toby.
I think the interesting question, Michelle, for you, which would be, you'll have a child. Would you say your child is middle class or will grow up to be working class or middle class? Because that, again, comes back to that social mobility, because they will have advantages you didn't have in their childhood. So they will never have known that working class lifestyle that you grew up with and that inculcated a lot of who you are and who you became. So, again, when we're talking about social mobility, is all class inherited or not? Part of the problem with the class discussion is that it was set into three rigid groups in the 19th century that reflected how the economy and society worked then, and it's quite unreflective of how it is now. For example, back then the middle class was really small. It was, the least populated class. Now, of course, the middle class is so big, it encompasses me and Rishi Sunak. That's mad. Any socio-economic group that contains both of us is no longer a useful signifier.
Well,
everyone tends to mark themselves down. So Rishi describes himself as middle class. Michelle, who's plainly middle class, describes herself as working class.
But I'm not so... let me respond. I definitely, categorically, would never, ever regard myself as middle class. You said upper middle class a minute ago, so you've just demoted me. I don't know what I've done to deserve the demotion, but, for me, class, it's not about your education, it's not about your house, it's not about your work, and it's certainly not about your income. To me, it's about your attitude, your value set, your outlook, your belief system. It's something that is almost impossible to describe because, to me, it is your being. It is in every interaction that you have, every aspiration that you have, your goals, your ambition, your drive. It's something that will never go away. It's not about, let's just say today I earn £100, tomorrow I earn, £500. It's irrelevant to me. Because no matter how much money I ever achieved, I would always have this fear of, I might lose everything. Am I good enough? Am I this? Am I that? It's something to me that runs through the very core of me and will never change. Never.
No, and that fear, I think, is, in terms of the cultural class element, is really, really elemental to it. I think that sense that it could all go away tomorrow and that there's no safety net. And I think that element of the working class has probably expanded quite a lot into the middle class, the more precarious middle class, the precariat as they're now known. And I think that's an interesting part of why I think just having three classes is quite unhelpful these days.
Let me bring some of my viewers in. Jane says, if you work for a living, you're working class. Sarah says, class structure is changing. Upper middle class is going upper class, lower middle class is going working class, and the existing working class is going peasant, says Sarah. James says, blue-collar workers were working class, white-collar workers middle class. Not sure it's prevalent anymore. Terence said, this is easy. I've got an espresso machine, so clearly I'm upper class. Bernard said class is all in the mind. Philip says, Michelle, you are class. I like that, so I'll take it. And another Phil says, Michelle, you asked for my views, but you always ignore me. He says it's on his bucket list to get his comment read out. Consider your bucket list made, Phil. I've just read your comment out. Apologies if I don't get to you. I literally get so many emails and tweets, etc., and I appreciate every single one of them. Look, that is all we've got time for. We have got romantic Valentine's Days things to be getting on with, and I'm sure you have as well. Take us with you on the radio if you're heading out tonight, if you're sitting in front of your box. Stick around. Nigel Farage is next. Whatever you're doing, have a fantastic night. Remember, the most important person to love you tonight is...
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm Jonathan Vautry. After a fairly dry couple of weeks, some of us are going to see a bit more rainfall on the cards as we move into the second half of this week. The high pressure that has been with us is slowly drifting its